It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. It is the Thursday Club looking ahead to our game against Everton on Saturday at Craven Cottage, the penultimate home match of the season. And let's be honest, we talk about all season, we got to win this game, we got to win that game. If we want to finish in Europe, we have to win this game. There is no ifs, buts, or maybes, or, a point would be all right. We actually just have to win this one, don't we? Here to look ahead to that game, look back at the Villa game and all the latest Fulham news, it's Jack Collins. Hello.
Hello, Sammy. How you doing?
Good, thank you. How was your weekend?
Yeah, very quiet and very calm, actually, for once. Had a very quiet bank holiday weekend, a lot of wedding prep. So that's been my weekend, which also meant that I was able to sit down and fundamentally take this game in its entirety, which was a huge shame.
Yeah, this was one that I missed in its entirety. I was at a wedding with no signal. So found out that we were 1-0 down with about 25 minutes to go, and then kind of had to go back to the wedding. And
that's how weddings work.
Yeah, well, there was Wi-Fi in like one certain part of it. So they was going for the last 25 minutes, not really concentrating on the conversation, thinking, what's going to happen here? Will Fulham get an equaliser? Will we find a way back into the match? But actually, Jack, all that happened is that Harrison Reed got injured and any chance of getting a point went out the window.
Yeah, it was an incredibly frustrating end to the game. I think it's probably, we'll start backwards here in terms of if you weren't a Fulham fan and you watched the added time, I think you would have been laughing. Because it was comical how little we decided to do with the ball. My kind of immediate thought was, if you were watching this and you didn't see the score, you would have thought that Fulham were 1-0 up in terms of the way that we knocked the ball around for those. And look, obviously you're down a man, and I appreciate that it's not easy to try and make those moments and make it all happen when you are, down a player. But we were knocking the ball around quite nicely, and the commentary kept being like, you wouldn't even tell Fulham are down to 10. And I was like, well, that is correct in the way that we're keeping the ball, but not in terms of how we're actually trying to work our way into the opposition final third. And I think that was the most frustrating thing for me, because just a little bit of, look, it doesn't always work when you lump the ball long, etc., all of those things. And I appreciate that we are a little bit bare bones in terms of attacking quality in the squad now. And especially with Rodrigo injured, being able to make changes off the bench that actually influence the game is more difficult than it was from before. But I was just so incredibly frustrated with those last sort of 7-8 minutes. And you look at it, Emil Smith-Rowe went back to doing that thing where he hides behind, playing peekaboo behind Axel Disasi for the last 5 minutes of this one. I was like, just offer for the ball. I don't mind if you make a mistake. Honestly, it's got to that point. And after we sat here and we praised him for his influence on the Southampton game and the fact that he was able to, come up trumps and show that. And we had that discussion about whether he's been, influential or not. And look, again, I want to point out that this is not a question of, is he going to come? I think he will come good next season. I really do. But I don't mind if you get the ball in that situation and you lose it. You try and take on a man, or, someone closes you down and you lose the ball. Fine. But you have to offer if you are playing in the number 10 slot in a team that are chasing the game. And just the idea that you watch the movement from behind defenders, it's so frustrating time and time again seeing this. And I think that's the bit that wound me up the most. There was also Joachim Andersen sort of just dilly-dallying on the ball for time at the back. And I was like, just some urgency in that moment. How much would a point have changed the outlook of where we are right now? Okay, maybe not hugely in terms of, does it put us in the box seat? Does it put us in the driving seat? No. But it changes the entire mood if you score a late equaliser in that game. It gives you that impetus going into these games at the weekend. And the fact that we just really didn't do anything with the ball in those 7 minutes, screaming at the TV is never a particularly useful pastime, but it was one that I practiced at the weekend because it just felt like we weren't doing anything with it. And look, credit to Villa, they defended well. There wasn't loads of chances for Fulham throughout the game. Obviously there's a goal disallowed from Ryan Sessegnon. There's no real complaints. It's a handball.
Yeah.
And I think that when you kind of come to those moments, you kind of thought that Fulham were going to build on that. There was a couple of, ball slid across that people nearly got on the end of. There was a couple of moments of kind of half chances, if you will. But I think that just generally across the course of the game, we weren't bad. We just weren't good. And that, I think, is the bit that, you watched it and first half, both teams were really sloppy. You look at that and you think, okay, if Villa are this sloppy at home, there's a lot of pressure on the line. I think the goal relieved a lot of that around Villa Park. But if we'd scored an early opener here, I think the place would have been really, really tetchy.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that we weren't able to capitalise on that, the fact that we concede another really soft goal from a set piece, I don't mind conceding from set pieces. I do mind conceding to 5'8" Yuri Tielemans when he has the entirety of the penalty area to pick his spot and head home. These are the small factors that filter into this. And yes, it's a good header. And yes, it's a well-worked set play. But actually, when you kind of put it in the context of why is nobody picking up Yuri Tielemans, it doesn't really make any sense as to why he has that much space in the box. And I think that's the kind of overarching element of frustration that took me after this one. But, game's a game, and I wasn't expecting to get anything out of Villa Park.
Yeah, there just are sometimes Fulham just kind of revert to the Fulham we all know and love, just a bit of a soft touch, just like the perfect side that you want to come to your ground when you've been on a bit of a bad run, and just where we just rolled over a little bit. We didn't disgrace ourselves. We didn't lose 5-0 or whatever.
Villa didn't have loads and loads of chances either, right? We didn't defend particularly badly throughout the game. Yes, Daniel Marlon should score when he goes clean through late in the game, but at that point you're chasing it. I can accept that a bit more, but we weren't chasing it, which was an issue. But the fact is that, when you're trying to push up and there's an extra player on the pitch, then you're going to leave gaps, right? Fine. I don't mind that. It's as bad to lose 2-0 as it is to lose 1-0 as far as I'm concerned at this point in the season. I don't think that always is the case, but I think at this point in the season, that doesn't really make a huge difference. So at that point, you're kind of looking at it and thinking, well, Villa didn't create loads, so we defended fine. And Sasha and Sander, I thought, did all right in the middle of the park. But on the whole, I just thought we carried almost no threat. And I know that there's been a lot of chat about Marco's substitutions as well.
Well, I wanted to come on to this because I felt like I listened to the Monday podcast, and I think George and Ben discussed this particular topic. And they said, was Marco too cavalier with 5 substitutes? I felt like George and Ben let him off the hook a bit with what they said. I think once is kind of just one of those, you learn from it. If it happened twice in the season, I'm sorry, but I just think it's really naive to make those. Look, what are you telling me that all 5 subs were 100% essential? Yes, Tete and Berger were, looking a little bit jaded at that point. Does he need to make all 5? I'm just not sure he does. Fair enough if it's the last 5 minutes.
Yes, I think this is the point.
I think if it's the last 5 minutes or it's stoppage time, you might as well take that gamble. But with 15 minutes remaining, it's happened once this season. It happened in the Wolves game, and then Joachim Andersen. Obviously, I did come up with a theory.
I was going to say, did you think Harrison Reed should go in goal? 5'6" Harrison Reed in net.
Would have kept 11 players on the pitch. No, I'm joking. I just don't know why you need to do it. You're putting us at complete risk. And as I say, 5 minutes to go, whatever, that seems calculated enough. But at 1-0 down, it was one of those games where a point was brilliant. And I know a point doesn't make a huge amount of difference in the race for 8th, but I think it sends a message, early kickoff. Oh, wow, Fulham have gone to Villa, a really tough place to go, and got a point. And when you're a good team like Fulham and there's a goal in it, the last 5-6 minutes of stoppage time would have been incredibly tense for the home crowd as we would have pushed forward. In the end, we struggled to create anything. I know that, as you say, we didn't show much urgency. It isn't impossible also for 10 men to at least cause some danger. But it was going to be difficult, right? It was tough enough for us to get a point there with 11 men.
Yeah.
We put ourselves down to 10. It's not Harrison Reed's fault. Obviously, it's incredibly unfortunate, and hopefully Harrison made a speedy recovery, and you could tell he was devastated by the fact he picked up an injury.
There's no criticism towards Harrison.
And no one's saying that there is, of course. Look, I think to do it once is excusable. I think for it to happen twice in the season is a little bit inexcusable in my book.
Yeah, it's just naive. You're right. And I think you're absolutely right. And there's no problem making 5 substitutions. I have no problem with utilising the entire field of substitutions. I have an issue with it being that early, I think. And look, there are more questions about the substitutions, I think, than just that. The other question is, at that point, Ryan Sessegnon really felt like our only feasible threat to goal. He felt like the only player who was causing difficulties in that Villa back line. And bringing him off really early, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of protection. There are big games coming up, etc. We're going to need a squad. And
did have a yellow.
Yes, we have injury issues as well. But I just thought it was unnecessary. It's not really Ryan. Yes, obviously you can make a mistake and get a second yellow card. Fine, no problem. But it's not really in his nature. He's not like he's the kind of player that's going steaming into challenges left, right, and centre. You know, and there's certain players on a yellow card. When Sasha's on a yellow, I'm like, might have to take him off here because like he does.
I mean, three of his substitutes were on yellow. So Tete, Berger, and Sessegnon were all on yellows. But I do think also there's an element of, as you say, I don't think this is just red card protection here. And particularly Sessegnon.
Especially considering Sessegnon pops up with the last minute winner against Southampton, right? Like, so we know that he has the ability, we have tangible evidence that he has the ability to pop up late in games and score an important goal for Fulham. So to take him off at that point, maybe Marco's gone back-to-back 90s is too much and we're trying to keep him fresh and rotated and there's a lot of football left to play. Fine, I get it. But I think at that point when he felt like our only real threat on that side, there were other options at that point to kind of flip around. And
it was
change.
also early, right? It was, you know, there was more than half an hour
minutes,
to go with Sessegnon. I think, look, if he gets to 75, 80 and you just, at that point, I feel like throwing in the dice, changing some personnel, maybe Sessegnon's just not going to. But as you say, I think that given the form he's in, given the fact that he seems one of our very few goal threats in a team that doesn't seem to have very many at the moment. Yeah, I mean, there does seem to be more and more questioning of Marco at the moment. It does feel like there's been a big series of games and probably in each of our last, since the Liverpool game really.
Bar Southampton maybe.
But even then, did he make the right starting lineup against Southampton?
Maybe. I mean, look, the substitutions were correct. So you get credit in the bag for that, right? And then this week it felt like the substitutions were incorrect. I felt like the starting lineup was not miles off what I would have probably liked it to be. Yeah. I think we could have done with a little bit more industry in midfield.
Well, we missed Andreas, right?
Yeah, I think we missed Andreas, but obviously not in the squad. We're not exactly sure how long or what's happened so that he's out. But, you know, in that situation, playing Harry there instead, probably the decision I would have gone with.
Yeah.
Unless you went with a midfield three, like unless you literally dropped the 10, but we know he doesn't really like to do that. So,
I mean, it's an indictment on Smith Rowe.
Yeah. I mean,
considering your main number 10 competition is out of the squad for whatever reason that is, we don't know, and you can't get the starting lineup. I mean, it's as much as I'm fully hoping that Smith Rowe turns it around next season, he's got a lot of convincing to do.
Right, to Marco, it seems as much as anyone else.
That's what I mean.
So like, well, he's got a lot of convincing to do to us as well, I think.
Well, yeah,
in terms of his performances, but you know that's okay. We'll give him that opportunity. Whether he's given that opportunity by the management staff is a very, very different question. But yeah, I just it was a frustrating experience. It wasn't a chastening experience, but it's just one of those where you kind of look at it and think the way that Villa played, especially up to their goal, where they were a little bit all over the place, there might have been an opportunity to really go for the throat here. It just felt like we didn't really do it.
Yeah. I wanted to mention the Fulham Women.
Yes.
Brilliant news that they finally have got out of the fifth tier. They're now into the fourth tier. A 6-0 win over Sport London e Benfica. I must admit,
seems a bit ropey.
I'd seen this is slightly my naivety about the league. I thought that this was like an international cup or something that Fulham were playing in, not a kind of Benfica team based in London. That's obviously just on me for being an idiot. But look, I think we talked a lot about the women on Fulhamish over the years and Steve J, and it feels like it's getting more professional and that, you know, we are light years behind where probably a club of our stature should be in the women's game when you see that clubs our size are generally in either the Championship or the Women's Super League. But look, we've been in this fifth tier. It's been a real struggle to get out of it. Only one promotion place to finally move into the fourth tier. And you look at the caliber of teams we're facing next season. I mean, it's still, to be honest, a lot below Fulham on the men's side.
To see the girls at Actonians away.
Yeah,
I can pop down the road.
It's an important step though, and I thought it was really nice that they actually also not only clinched it, but clinched it at Craven Cottage in front of a good crowd as well. Like the Stevenage Road stand, the Johnny Haynes stand looked fairly full too. It just feels like a real positive step in the right direction.
100%. Yeah. Like, and look, it's been a, as you say, a slog, I think. And that league having, you know, that one promotion place has meant that it's been a lot of yo-yoing, I think, over the course of the years. But to do it not just in, you know, finally get out of it, but also do it in some style as well. I think, you know, you look at the results recently, but also I think you look at the way that the division is shaken out. It's important to kind of look at it and say, okay, there's a pretty dramatic win. It's one that's pretty cohesive. And, you know, it's a big opportunity. It's also, you know, one of those moments where you look in and be like, okay, how are we going to deal with the step up, etc. But I think that, you know, one step at a time in the right direction, up to step 4 now. Let's consolidate. Let's keep moving. But yeah, a really impressive result, a really impressive season. And I think that, you know, what we've seen all together from the girls over the course of this season has been a real step in the right direction from what we'd seen in years previously.
Yeah, massive congratulations, and great to see the women going from strength to strength. Other bit of news that's dropped actually today, Timmy Castagne has had surgery on tears in his ankle.
Yes.
And so he posted a photo on his Instagram with the caption, I mean, he's kind of got his left ankle, I believe it is, in a kind of a cast, it looks more like. It says, happy the surgery went well. I've struggled with tears in my ankle for 4 months now. I've tried my best to continue, but it was getting worse. Tough to leave the team and miss national team in such an important time. Looking forward to finally being myself next season. I feel like this is explaining a lot. Not that, like, you know, I think Timmy Castagne was doing admirably, but you could kind of tell towards the end that he was really struggling. And I think we talked about a lot that, like, I don't think this is just tiredness, is it?
I don't know. I was like, I don't think he'd sat down since Christmas, right? Like I think that was the line I've used before. So I think a part of it was like, he might just be absolutely knackered, but you're right. It makes it all a little bit clearer. It was that
Arsenal game, right, where it just looked like
he was running through mud at times, and you're like, oh, this is not pretty watching him get kind of done left, right, and centre by wingers who he'd normally, you know, give a good battle, if not, you know, dominate in the same way as Kenny Tete has in recent years. But yeah, I think this explains a lot, and look, good luck to him with the recovery. Obviously a tough time to lose a player in the season, but if it had just got to that point where it was just not worth carrying on with, then let's get him back for pre-season and look forward to next year.
It does feel a little bit like we're falling apart just in the fitness stakes, right? Obviously Rodrigo Moon is out, Harrison Reed out. We know that Anthony Robinson's kind of got this ongoing tendinopathy issue that's obviously causing him a lot of pain and discomfort. I mean, we're very metaphorically and physically limping towards the line here, aren't we?
Yeah, 100%. You know, once upon a time I was falling in love, now I'm only falling apart, etc., etc., etc. But it does feel like we are just breaking at the seams. Like, it's just like got to the point where we've just overloaded it, and there have been a lot of players who played a lot of minutes, etc. And look, it does go to show, we spoke a couple of weeks back about, you know, Europe and being ready for it and that possibility. And I know that's obviously not a particularly great question to be talking about now. We've dropped into the bottom half of the table, but you know, we were talking about that and saying, are we ready for that campaign? And you were talking about the Conference League and saying there's less games, etc. Even another 6-10 games on the schedule with the squad size the way it is would have, I think, genuinely broken us this season. So it just goes to show you what a step up you need to make in terms of not just quality, but also quantity in the squad to actually compete on multiple fronts. And I think, you know, if we are to get to that position, and we can talk about the Everton game and discuss this in a bit more detail, but I think if you are to get to that position, it shows you that you probably need to bring in 6-7 players. You know, that's if you're not going to lose anyone, I think, at this point, in order to compete with that and rotate into that section. So yeah, I think it probably just gives you an idea of how hard the squad have had to work this year.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a pretty brutal time. Certainly, the treatment room at Motspur Park is definitely getting bigger and bigger. And finally, Brentford away sold out today to, I think, 1,000+ loyalty members. So, yeah, congratulations if you managed to get a ticket. But I think also, you know, proof that probably, and it seems like this is coming, but it's not 100% sure when it is, that maybe the loyalty points need looking at. And actually, completely nearly forgot to mention it, actually, since we've done a podcast, myself and you, season ticket prices,
yes,
well, they're kind of out. They've basically not actually...
They've announced the rise.
They've announced the rise.
Price.
2.8% is the line. I think we're led to believe that it's 2.8% across the board. Not a huge amount of detail on that yet. The club also made a commitment to having more season tickets next year, made a fresh commitment to concessions, which has obviously been a problem at clubs like Spurs and West Ham, I believe, but good to see that commitment. This is a really tricky one. I mean, the Fulham Supporters Trust came out and criticised it. which I thought was an impressive and a bit of a change of what I maybe expected them to come out with as a stance. I think they pointed to the fact that lots of London clubs have actually frozen their prices.
Yeah.
I know that Crystal Palace and West Ham did at the very least. I assume Brentford did because they always do nice things like that. But
I think they did, yeah.
2.8 at the same time. I think like the general, if I'm trying to read what lots of people are thinking, I think most people have kind of begrudgingly accepted it. A price freeze would have been lovely, but also there is inflation. Kind of what can you do?
Yeah, I feel quite similarly. It was basically what I was expecting. I didn't expect it to be a massive jump. I think there's a frustration with it in that 2.8% doesn't feel like loads. I imagine obviously over the course of that amount of season tickets and that amount of money, it's going to be a relatively sharp amount of money in terms of a total for the club. I think at 2.8 you get such a gesture of goodwill off freezing it that is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Like, and then that's always the question. But then that's for people who do numbers to deal with and not me, right? Like I understand it from that perspective. I wasn't too disheartened. I'm critical of the club on a number of things. I think that prices are too high, kind of across the board. Equally, when I talk to friends who have season tickets or buy tickets at other clubs in London, you tell them the price of my season ticket, they're like, that's all right. And I'm like, yeah, it's one of the things that the club have been, relatively solid on. I think, relatively being the operative word, but the season ticket prices for those who've had them for a while have tended to be okay in terms of what they've been and how they've stacked together. So look, we'll see when the prices come out, like exactly what the damage is, but yeah, I don't think I was expecting loads different, and I don't think I can also sit here and be way too critical of it in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, doing the rough maths, I paid $6.75 for my season ticket in H4 last year. By virtue of adding 2.8%, that becomes just under 693. So it's still under the £700 mark for what I think is a fairly base level ticket that I've got in the Hammersmith end. It's not it's not off to the sides, but also it's not side of the pitch. So it's a fairly average seat when you compare it. I think it's okay. I think what's interesting though is like we are creeping up towards now £40 a ticket for a season ticket.
Yeah.
And whereas previously I used to think that like £40 was a lot for an individual match ticket, I think it's slightly a sign of the times. I think if you benchmark us to the clubs that, I think you can say compared to Spurs or Arsenal, but I don't think that's not the lanes that we're swimming in.
No, but like I'm talking about West Ham.
Yeah,
really.
And Palace and Brighton.
And we're quite a lot cheaper than West Ham. And we play much better football than West Ham. I know that's not how you're supposed to judge it. I get it. But there is that, you look at that one. I think we're pretty in line with Palace. I don't think we're miles off what their season tickets cost. We're obviously a bit more expensive than Brentford. But again, you expect that in terms of their model and the way that they're operating. So, yeah, I don't have loads either way on it. I'm not like delighted. I'm not like, oh, what a day, what a wonderful gesture from the club. Equally, I'm not all that critical either. And look, there will be people who are out there who are far more critical than I am on this. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and also I guess if a price freeze this year only meant that the club would up it by 6% next year, then well, I mean, it's nice for a year, but eventually...
equally, they could up it by 6% after putting it up by 2.8%. So, I don't think that really matters, like, in terms of how it shakes out.
No, but at least, like, a few years ago when they made the just under 20% jump, that was a big one. Shock.
And, like, this is the thing, though, like, that 20% jump we all railed against at the time, right? And correctly so. But actually, you kind of look at it and think that's been normalized within now. This 2.8% increase is on top of that 20% that we made that jump on, right?
Yeah, and and it was between 3 and 4%, I believe, last year. So there has been constant increases here.
Yeah. So I mean, but
I can see why the Supporters Trust have made that statement, and for what it's worth, I'm very happy that they have. I think that's what I think Supporters Trusts, like trade unions, should always be looking in the supporters' interests, right? And should never just be taking things lying down while also, being reasonable, but also at the same time, I think that's what a supporters trust often will do, is look out for supporters' best interests. And that it is undoubted that this will be, for some people, another rise that might mean actually next year, you know what?
100%. 100%. And that's obviously, we know people who are like, "That's it, I'm done, I'm finished," and that's a result of constant rises, not rather than this one in particular. And so that probably needs to be addressed. But yeah, I mean, I can't say I'll sit here and tell you that I expected anything different.
No, and I do still think that the core underlying issue is those that can't get season tickets or don't have access to season tickets, and trying to protect loyal fans from your...
There's got to become some sort of membership discount. Like, it's just the only way of doing like a proper membership discount in terms of what's
or a way of buying, 5 tickets in a season so that you're not, you want to go
do this season packs.
I had one when I first started supporting Fulham, and I think this was at Loftus Road. I remember, I was begging my dad, please, can we go to Fulham? And they had this, and it was a really attractive thing at the time. And so how they did it is you could get 6 tickets, I think, for the season. And I lived quite far away at the time, so even getting to 6 was, quite a big thing for me. And you got 1 Category A star game. Yeah. So I think that was Liverpool, Arsenal, United, if I'm not mistaken. You then got 1 Category A, Chelsea, Spurs, and all of those. But then I think you had 2 Category Bs and 2 Category Cs. So, you'd have to make sure you went to West Brom and to Burnley, and also probably like a...
Did you get to pick them or not?
Yeah, you got to pick your games from a list. I don't know, can't exactly remember how the process works, but I thought it was a really smart thing because, it meant that you guaranteed your ticket for the big game. Everyone wants to go watch Fulham against the very, very biggest teams, but at the same time, made you have a ticket for West Brom and the games that Fulham would, Blackburn and Bolton, and all the games that we would traditionally struggle to sell out.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not saying they have to advocate that, but that was a good way for people who were in between, like I was at that time.
Yeah.
Season tickets a big commitment, young kids,
I assume
families.
You're about 13 as well.
But at the same time, kind of gets people into Fulham. There's so many ways like that. Look, we could probably do a special on it over the summer.
Yeah.
One Fulhamish. But I thought we'd talk about the season ticket price rise. Next, we'll look to our penultimate game on our season tickets this season, which is Everton at the Cottage. So we'll discuss that next. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. Sammy here with Jack Collins. If you're at the match on Saturday, do pop into Craft Beer Co. at Hammersmith Broadway, either before the game or after game. The perfect place for a pre or post match pint with their wonderful selection of beers, ciders and spirits, as well in one of the most beautiful pubs in London. It's located right at Hammersmith Tube Station, so if you're doing a little bar crawl down the Palace Road, Craft Beer Co. is the place to start. It's also the place where we film our quick takes, which we'll be back to on Saturday. Jack, 3 o'clock kickoff against Everton at the Cottage. This one has a real nice end of season feel to it. I think it's going to be good weather. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff. It's kind of everything you want from a game in May. I mean, if I was going to advise someone, and if I maybe with the power of hindsight as well, to pick a Fulham game, I'd probably suggest this one, right? I'd say, right, it's a game that, okay, I never say that Fulham are going to win a game, but look, you're going to have a good game here. You've got 3 o'clock kickoff, Craven Cottage in the sunshine, walking down either Bishop's Park or the river. It's just what we love Fulham for.
Yeah, I
got way too into that.
Yeah, you really love that. If I know Marco Silva's sides, if I was him trying to get someone to come and watch Fulham, I'd probably do it at the start of a season rather than at the end. But
good point.
I'd take your point. Yeah, I mean, look, Everton on a pretty dreadful run of form, and that early sort of promise under David Moyes has kind of ebbed away now that they've become safe, and it's kind of weird, a bit comfortable.
Because I think the general opinion of Everton is that David Moyes has done a great job, and he has, but the run of form is quite bad.
Yeah.
If this was Marco Silva, Fulham fans would not be happy.
No,
there's a lot of draws in there, but 1 win in 10.
They don't lose many games.
1 win in 10.
And what was that, Forest?
Yeah, so their 2 wins in the last 12 have been away at Forest and away at Palace, which just makes me a little bit nervous that what they enjoy is tough little away days and nicking it.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're really soft from an underbelly perspective at the moment. They were 2-0 up against Ipswich at the weekend, and they just chucked it away. Look, it took a Julio Enciso absolute screamer to get them back into the game, but You know, at that point, at 2-1 up in your penultimate game against Goodison, and I wonder if the emotion of the entire situation is just starting to seep in to everyone at Everton at the moment. That, you know, it's got to that moment where obviously they had the kind of big crescendo with the equaliser against Liverpool, you know, a couple of months back, and I wonder if they're like, oh, are we actually going to get to that again? Was that the moment that we said goodbye to Goodison Park? And I think that there probably does feel like this sense of nostalgia around at the moment, but they come away and they'll come away from that as well. So it is worth bearing that in mind, that the kind of ghosts of the past are probably not going to be haunting them at Craven Cottage in the same way that they are at Goodison Park at the moment. Yeah, they've not been great. And I think that it's been interesting kind of keeping an eye on how it's changed, but they're quite I've just said they have a soft underbelly, so it's quite weird to kind of say this in juxtaposition, but they seem to be able to find a way to pick up points. They scrap and get points, even if they concede too many goals. They're sort of just finding random moments of inspiration to dig themselves out of holes. And whilst they don't look as defensively cohesive as they definitely did when Moyes went in there first, I think that there is a sense that they have a little bit more freedom as well from an attacking perspective. And we've seen that in recent games as well, their goals scored. So I think that whilst this is a tricky game, it is one that if Fulham take the initiative in, we should be able to take advantage of, because Everton are on the beach, right? Like, the whole point here is that they have this home thing going on where they are saying goodbye to Goodison, and that is one whole situation. But away from that, it's like, you know, does anyone here in this Everton side want to get injured before next week's last game at Goodison Park? And the answer is no, right? Like, nobody wants to miss that game. They all want to be part of the team that plays in the last game at Goodison Park. They will, just naturally. It would be exactly the same if it was Craven Cottage the other way around. Yeah. The game beforehand, you'd be like, might shirt that tackle. So Fulham have an opportunity to take the initiative here. And I think that if they can do that, we saw obviously with Liverpool and Chelsea at the weekend, that even if you take 5% off the gas, you know, you can be punished in the Premier League. And I think that Fulham have the capacity to punish teams if they are not at 100% against us. And I just wonder if Everton will have a couple of other things on their mind here, and potentially that opens this game up for Fulham.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way. Never forget, were you at, it wasn't the final game at Craven Cottage, but people thought it might be. It was against Leicester City in 2002. It was a 0-0 draw. Yeah. I remember it was the worst send-off to Craven Cottage. It was genuinely the worst match of football I think I've ever seen. And there's been some high contenders from watching Fulham over the years. It was terrible. Yeah. Obviously, it wasn't quite in the same way, because I think there was an element of hope at that time that we would actually go back to Craven Cottage. Eventually we did, not in the way that Mohamed Al Fayed wanted. Have you ever seen those pictures of what the Craven Cottage could have looked like?
I don't want to talk about it. It's deeply uncomfortable.
He genuinely wanted to build basically the Medeski Stadium, but keep the facade of the Stevenage Road. The cottage gone, no view of the river. It's actually horrendous. It felt very futuristic, I think, in the early noughties. It would have aged so badly.
Yeah. We'd be like the Emirates. I jest. It's not good, and I don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. It makes me feel a bit sick.
It actually is. It's nauseating when you look at it. I've actually got a mug at my parents' house, which was like celebrating Craven Cottage, and the very end of it is what the new Craven Cottage is supposed to look like. So I'm reminded it fairly often when I have a cup of tea at my mum and dad's house. So
I would bin that mug if I were you.
It's quite a nice mug, the rest of it. It's just the last bit where it's like the new stadium is pretty horrible. I'll take a photo of it one day and put it on my Twitter or something like that. From an Everton point of view, I mean, I think the thing to say is that even the losses, though, that they've suffered have been tight ones. Obviously, Chelsea needed an early goal against them and then struggled to really kill off the game at Stamford Bridge. Even Man City eventually got past them at Goodison a few weeks ago. So I do hope that Fulham can win this game. We've obviously got so much riding on it, but I think it's going to be ugly. I think if Fulham do it, I think it's going to be 1-0, 2-1. This is certainly not going to be a barnstormer, because I think you're right that Everton just know how to dig in and often know how to get a point from it. So I've got a feeling that this is going to be a bit of an ugly battle. After selling why you should come to this game so hard about 10 minutes ago, actually, it doesn't sound very appealing.
They're just such a physical unit, right? Like Raul going up against Branthwaite and Jake O'Brien in the middle there.
No, Tarkovsky's a big boost for us.
No, Tarkovsky is a big boost, but like they are two very big boys. Like, as in, that is not a Fulham are going to get joy in the aerial battles here. So the question is getting the ball on the deck and trying to play around them. Just Castagne having a bit of an Indian summer season. He's been really, really impressive. James Garner finally starting to show, I think, a bit of that potential that made him so highly coveted at United's early doors. So there are good players in this side, and there are obviously players that can punish you. Obviously, we saw Dwight McNeil score an absolute banger of his own at the weekend, which was a lovely, lovely strike. And it does feel like they've been given a little bit more license to play. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's back as well, so whether he starts or Beto starts is one to keep an eye on. But I think generally, technically Fulham are a stronger side than Everton. There should be players here who are able to kind of work their magic and weave little patterns around at times. But if we get dragged into a dogfight, I think we're going to struggle. And Everton will want to drag us into a dogfight. Now, maybe the fact that it should be in blazing sunshine on the banks of the Thames on a Saturday afternoon might help in that regard, in that, it's easier to do that when it's lashing with rain and, it's all real nasty. So potentially that changes things. But I think that there is an opportunity here to go out and make a statement. And kind of in the context of Europe and in the context of where we are in the season, obviously the weekend was a big blow. I didn't really expect Bournemouth to beat Arsenal, but I did expect them to get a point. I thought Brentford would beat Man United, and I wasn't quite sure how it was going to shake out, but I think a point was probably fair between Brighton and Newcastle. So Bournemouth have picked up 2 more points than I expected. Outside of that, I wasn't expecting us to get anything out of Villa Park. And people, the conversation was, well, is Europe dead? Is the dream over? And I think it's unlikely. I still think it's going to be a struggle to get into those European spots from here. And look,
I think that's more on us now. I think that's more because I think of the situation that Fulham are not.
Yeah, as opposed to the points on the board.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm starting to sadly doubt it is not because of. I think if Fulham had a fully fit squad and all the options available to us, and maybe a little bit better form, I just think that's
that's lots of things, right? But like,
yeah.
So I mean, if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bike. But there is a level of this that I think that if Fulham win against Everton and then against Brentford, like, I think it's on, right? I think we go into the final day with it in our own hands.
Yeah,
but that's, there's 2 massive ifs. We have to go and win against Everton to begin with, who, as we just pointed out, are hard to break down. And then from there, go and win at the G-Tech, which is going to be difficult considering the form that Brentford have found themselves in right now. And look, we'll preview that game properly when we talk about it next week. But on the whole, I'm kind of looking at it and thinking, if we win these next 2, I think it's in our hands on the final day. Now, Obviously, that still involves playing City on the final day, and what they have to play for, etc., etc. Then, they'll have an FA Cup final the week before, so who knows exactly what shape they'll be in. But I think that if we win these next 2 games, it's in our hands on the final day. If we don't, I think it's probably done, because I can't see a world where on the final day we need to catch other people and we beat City and they also drop points. I just don't foresee that. No. Whereas I think if it's in our hands, the cottage will be absolutely blazing on that final day, and that maybe gives you the lift that you need to pull off something special. So this is it now. Like, as you said right at the top of the show, there's no more ifs, buts and maybes. This is now a point where Fulham win this game and let's have a look at the table, and then we'll see where we are ahead of the Brentford game. But you kind of look at who everyone else is playing. Brentford play Ipswich away this weekend. Portman Road has been an absolute walkover for everybody that's gone there. So it may as well feel, that they're going to probably pick up those 3 points. But Brighton are away at Wolves, which is a really tricky assignment these days. And then Bournemouth are at home against Aston Villa, who I think, now with Champions League chasing destiny in their hands, might well put up a bit of a scrap against this Bournemouth side.
Oh, Villa's lives are on the line in that one, just like
Villa's lives have been on the line in every game now, and so they were against us, and they were a little bit stoppy. They got away with it. I don't think they'll be as bad next weekend. I think they will use that as a launch pad. So I think there's a chance that Bournemouth drop points here, and that then puts us in a situation where Brighton, Brentford, etc., we could all be within a point each other ahead of next week if we win this game. And it just comes down to that now. It's like by hook or by crook, Fulham need to win this game. Otherwise, there is no point us sitting here. And we'll obviously talk about the Brentford game and talk about wanting to win it, irrelevant of whether Europe's in the case or not, because it's a derby and it's against that lot and it's at the GTEC and it'd be great to win.
It might be a case of if not us, not them.
Well, yeah, but also suddenly praying for Crystal Palace to win the FA Cup the day before, like it's.
I'm feeling.
Yeah, exactly. So like, there's that situation as well with all of it, but like. If we don't win this weekend against Everton, there is no point us sitting here next week and talking about what the ramifications are of the game against Brentford for Europe. It's as simple as that. Like, we'll still talk about the game, we'll still discuss it, we'll still chat through it, but it's win or bust here from now on in. Yeah. And that's where we're at ahead of this weekend.
Yeah, there is no, I think, any you said at
the top. There's no good point. You know, we score a 90th minute equaliser, everyone will cheer and everyone will be like, we're here, great. But the reality will sink straight back in after the game. It doesn't change the fact we will celebrate that goal. But it'll be like, well, it's done.
Yeah, we might as well fight for top 10. If we don't win this weekend, it might be like, well, it'd be nice to finish in the top half. Yeah. And that's still an achievement. It's still quite good. We'd have all taken it at the beginning of the season to finish in the top 10. We're all desperate for 8th because there's a real prize there. But at the same time, we'll adjust. But I think that's it at the weekend. It is win or bust here. And I think that the fixtures speak for themselves, right? It's hard to predict the future. It's a little bit futile. But if Fulham win 2 games, I think you're in the driving seat no matter what.
I do too.
I think that there is a chance,
especially given one of them's against one of the teams around us.
Yeah, I think that there is a significant chance that obviously results go against us, and I think if you're behind on the final day and you've got to play Manchester City, this could be a Manchester City that's secured Champions League football, maybe, and whatever happens in the FA Cup final, they might have already won a trophy, and they've got the Club World Cup to think about. So there is lots of possibilities, but look, I sat here last week and came up with my tin hat explanation how we could finish 7th. That's obviously out the window. Yeah. That did require us beating Villa. To finish 8th now requires to beat Everton, and that's it. What team do we do in order to try and beat Everton this weekend?
Stephen Bender in goal.
I mean, you'd imagine...
The back four kind of picks itself now, right?
Back four picks itself. You imagine it's Berger and Lukic, even though, I mean, there was a point raised on the Monday podcast is that too safe? But I can't see it not being Berger and Lukic, to be perfectly honest.
I think it'll be Berger and Lukic.
The only thing I'm thinking is that at the game at Goodison, I think Smith Rowe was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I wonder if this is a game for Emil Smith Rowe. And I was critical of him earlier in the game, but like equally, there are points where coming on as a substitute takes some time to get used to it, right? And takes some time into the game.
This feels like an Emil Smith Rowe kind of occasion. Like he's going to get a bit of time on the ball. He's going to be a nice day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Here's one for everyone. Has Emil Smith Rowe played well in a Fulham shirt, not in the sunshine? Answers on a postcard, please. Because I can't remember one. I can only remember him having decent games in the sunshine.
Yeah, I mean, he played away, Yasmin just said, played away at Leicester in January.
Yeah, but that's Leicester. They were the worst team in the league at that point. So,
and I mean, Everton was nighttime, I guess, when he played at Goodison Park.
Yeah.
It wasn't a terrible day. I wasn't there.
It was quite a pleasant evening.
5:30 kickoff. You are right. I mean,
he likes the sunshine. Let him play in the sunshine. I'd play Smith Rowe. I would, because I think that it allows you to rotate potentially on the wings. It gives you a little bit more of game changers, and we're lacking them at the moment. We saw that at the weekend, right? Like, you're lacking players that can come on in different positions and make differences. And I think when you start with Iwobi and Harry Wilson and Ryan Sessegnon, you're kind of at a place you're like, where are we with all these players? I don't think Harry's fully up to speed yet. I didn't think he was particularly brilliant against Villa, but he did okay.
Yeah,
I think that there is... I would probably go Smith Rowe with Sessegnon on the right and Iwobi on the left and Raul, and then bring on Harry. And I'd bring on Harry in the 10 if it's not working for Smith Rowe.
Or I guess you could put a
at half time.
You could put Iwobi in the 10, but Wilson on the right. I believe that having Wilson on the bench provides some more options, and Harry's proven very successfully this season that he can be an impact substitute.
Exactly.
If you need him to save you from the game, that's what I'd go for. let's play the Smith Rowe card.
I think it might be time.
This weekend.
Fingers crossed it's an ace and not a joker.
Fingers crossed. Let's do some emails. Let me find my emails. I've got them here. Don't worry, we're all good. This one from Sam Purcell. Enjoyed this one. Hi Fulhamish. Gutting result and one I never held out much hope for, as it's just not a ground we get a result at. I have an instinctive hate of us playing teams in claret and blue, so I decided to do the numbers.
I love these.
In the Premier League, our away record against claret and blue, Villa, West Ham and Burnley is played 38. How many have we won?
5.
3.
And are all of them West Ham?
Drawn
12.
7.
Wow.
Lost 28.
That's incredible.
And then the bonus stat is 0 wins, 7 draws and 23 defeats in our last 30 against Burnley. It's a cursed collar combination for us. We need Marco to do some Arteta-style training where he puts the under-21 in these colours in drills against the first team. Keep up the good work from Sam
Burnley are
Purcell.
coming back as well. There's more drop points next year.
There's 3 teams in claret and blue next season.
Oh, God. That's worrying. Thank you, Sam. That's great stuff. This is the stuff I live for.
Thank God Everton playing blue, hey?
Yeah.
Because if they didn't, we'd be in a lot of trouble.
All Everton need to do to beat us is wear claret socks.
Yeah.
No, we'd be screwed.
I mean, we won a couple of games in purple this season. So our own claret and blue, we're fine.
I think this is a stretch. I wouldn't think I would call that claret, and there definitely wasn't any blue involved.
If you mix claret and blue, what do you get?
You get our mucky purple.
Georgie Brooks says, long-time listener, stalker status achieved on bothering with you dumb questions and observations. I have 2 more. Number 1, Silva is a brilliant manager. Players improve under his coaching. Is it possible that a big part of this is our formulaic approach? We have clear patterns of play with pretty one-touch triangles down the left, etc. Could our inability to break down teams be because when we have to ad-lib, the overall quality drops because it's not so scripted and players revert to their natural level? Before Villa scored at the weekend, we had a 3-on-2 break and failed to register a shot from it. They went up the other end and scored. Looking bereft of ideas in a game we are chasing is a bit of a pattern in too many games. I've got his second point in a second, but that one?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much spot on as far as I'm concerned. The part of our success also relies on this formulaic kind of nature, right? So I don't want to sit here and criticize it too much. And for years when we were in the Championship bouncing around between managers, I spent ages being like, I just would like to see some patterns, repeatable patterns of play that we can score from. And so now we have it. I think it would be unfair of me to sit here and criticize it, right? Like that doesn't work in the same way. But there has to be an element of off-the-cuff football as well. And you need mavericks in those situations. And actually, mavericks don't tend to do particularly well within Silva systems. Potentially, this is why Smith Rowe has slightly struggled a little bit in his first year. But I think that, we do tend to play within a certain structure. You still have to give players, the license to do things. And I think Alex Iwobi is probably a good example of someone who can play within a system, but also is able to pull things out of the bag that you're not expecting. Willian, probably another one that you could say that for, maybe in his first spell rather than his second, shall we say? But the point stands. So I think that there is definitely an element of this, and there you do want a little bit more of that kind of magic and sparkle that you get from those players who can pull something out of thin air. I think it's also part of the reason we don't particularly shoot from range very much. We talked about this a couple of weeks back, right? We got a question about it, the fact that we just don't tend to release from distance all that much. I think that's probably part of the same question, if you're actually talking about it. Marco wants us to work the ball into, goal-scoring positions with high chance of getting a shot on target, etc. It does mean that when teams work out those patterns, and maybe this is part of the whole, we get to the end of the season, there's more tape. Maybe over the summer, Marco goes and formulates a whole host of other plans. I don't think it necessarily changes the entire structure, but he starts to build different ideas. At this point in the season, Fulham's idea has been analysed to death by an Unai Emery, for example, who is famously known for analysing the tape. And gone, well, if you close down these channels, then Fulham are not going to create opportunities in the same way. So yeah, I think it's a really, really valid point, and one that I think I would kind of double down on and say definitely correct. Whether it's a good or a bad thing is probably slightly more up in the air.
Georgie's second question. We have scored from only 4 set pieces this season, and the next worst is 6. All relegated teams sit on this number. As I understand it, we are the only team in the top flight that does not employ a set piece coach. How related are these two things?
Yeah, I mean, 2 absolutely sensational questions, I should say, Georgie. So thank you very, very much. Yes, look, I think, again, Marco is a manager who likes to have, his fingers in kind of everything in terms of how the club runs, whether that's recruitment, whether that's, being on the training ground and working on those drills. And I imagine there are elements to it, every bit of the game that he wants. But I think those numbers speak for themselves. Like the facts are that we were excellent at set pieces in the Championship. And we spoke before about that kind of blocking run and all of those things that kind of, work within it. That has kind of run its course, I think, in terms of what we're trying to do. And that number is far, far, far too low. Now, you can talk about bad deliveries all you want, and there have been, a load of them over the course of this season. But equally, I think you probably kind of look at it and think, well, is it just a swing the ball into a dangerous area and hope for the best? Because that is probably not going to cut it at this level anymore. When teams are practicing kickoffs, when they are practicing throw-in routines, and our kind of vibe is vibes and chill, that's probably not going to be enough. And look, it's those small margins that you can operate within to improve, right? And, I hate to bring up Brentford as an example, but they did this in their first year up. They worked really hard on long throws. Now, maybe it's a bit of a rudimentary tactic. And to be honest, I think they play relatively rudimentary football. But when you kind of look at what that does and what it achieves, the amount of goals scored, there's a brilliant bit of, a variety of books, but I think I'm talking about Soccernomics in terms of how it all plays out. And it's basically about long throws. And it's like, why doesn't every team do long throws? Because it gives you a mad chance of scoring every time it goes in. And the answer is, well, some teams try to result. But like the facts of the matter are that, ultimately, if you...
But isn't that the same with you can say the same for short corners?
Yeah, short corners work better than long corners every single time.
But then look how many goals Arsenal have scored from not short corners this season. It feels like it's constantly evolving. I think what you said first time around is just like, are our tactics a little bit stale from set pieces? I think you're right. I used to think Fulham were pretty good from corners.
But Arsenal also have 6 players over 6'4".
But we're not small.
Well, we are and we aren't. We have a big core in Berger and Bassi and Anderson and Lukic. But that is it.
Yeah, I think that's what I think that initial point was pretty spot on. I just think it's a little bit stale. I think I see a lot of the patterns that we've done. We constantly trying from a corner to find the near post, flick on, back post goal. It's worked for us a couple of times this season, but also it feels quite predictable, and it also does rely on almost the absolute perfect
I think we just probably need some variation, and that involves bringing in someone who is a specialist within this situation, right? And the more marginal gains you get, the better you become. And I think that we are probably just ignoring the marginal gains right now. And whether that's something to do with the idea that Silva wants control over all of these elements, then you have to pick your poison, right? If that's Marco Silva's kind of line in the sand, and he's like, I want a set piece coach, I want to organise the set pieces, and I want to do this, then at what point do we just go, well, that's what the manager wants, and we're all Marco Silva fans. We want Marco Silva to succeed, and we want Marco Silva to stay. If the choice is Marco Silva stays or Marco Silva leaves and Fulham get a set piece coach, then put that out to the fan base and see how many people choose a set piece coach.
I think I also do wonder though, and this is a little bit more in Marco we trust, is why it's not Marco's not stupid, and I'm sure that is there a reason why, and we don't really know this without asking him, that it doesn't feel like there's that much variation in set pieces. Is it because actually you find it much more useful to spend more time on build-up play, and actually you could waste all the time in the world coming up with the most intricate set plays, which happen a few times every game, or you could actually spend all your time worrying about build-up and possession and triangles and controlling the game.
You should be able to do both, though. Like lots of teams do both.
Yeah.
I don't think that's
I just can't believe that it's just because Marco hasn't thought of it.
No, I don't either. But I wonder what the reasoning is. And maybe it's a question we can ask Jack Kelly to ask, at a press conference and be what's the drill? Why don't we have a set piece coach? Because
what is the drill?
Well, what is the drill? That is the question.
What are the drills?
What's the point of drills if you can't dream?
Got this one from Brantanio. It's actually Sam from Auckland, New Zealand. Says, hello, Fulhamish. I have a question for you regarding our current striker situation. My YouTube algorithm suggested watching every Premier League goal for Fulham at 2022. Is there a redemption story waiting for Carlos Vinicius? After all, it was only 2 years ago he took over from a banned Mitrovic and made some very impactful contributions. Does Marco need to trust the manic that is Carlos? Can he actually help us for the last few games? We needed the change earlier against Chelsea. Raul looked jaded. I would also had rather kept on Wilson or Sess in the Villa game. Thanks for your guys' work. Sam from Auckland, New Zealand, who then says, P.S. Auckland FC also won the A-League last week. Yeah. So it's nice to support a team at the top. They're going to be in the Club World Cup, aren't they? They're the only amateur team in the Club World Cup.
They're not an amateur team.
Auckland City, having qualified for the FIFA Club World Cup 2025 as the tournament's only amateur club, the Navy Blues have won an astonishing 10 continental titles in the past 12 seasons.
Yeah, because basically Auckland FC and the Phoenix
are in the
A-League, which is part of the Asian Federation rather than the Oceania Federation.
Okay, there we go. I've learned something new. If you go
every day's a school day.
Don't go to Auckland and make the same rookie error I did. You'll look really stupid.
Yeah, ask people if they're City or FC. Or I'd imagine there are quite a lot of people that are both. Considering they don't play in the same federation or league, you could probably get away with supporting both.
All of our Kiwi listeners absolutely shouting at their AirPods right now. Anyway,
up the Knicks.
Back to Sam's question about Carlos Vinicius. I mean,
I don't think there's a redemption story in here. Much as I would love that, I am a big sucker for narrative, as everyone knows. But I think this story might be done.
Sorry, Sam.
And what I would like is a Cameron Archer in the summer, please.
Right,
striker that can do something different. Striker's a bit of a poacher. Striker that can kind of just run the channels and be that kind of player. That's something to change things. He's down at Southampton. He's just been relegated. Pick up Cam Archer. Good player.
Okay, there we go. What a great note to end the podcast on. We will be back on Sunday/Monday with a review of everything that happens in the Everton game. And then myself and Jack will be back this time next week looking ahead to the Bees game. Big game down at the G-Tech. If you haven't listened yet, the latest Full America pod is on the podcast feed where Charlie Kipp and Ben Jarman caught up with the gang at Fulham NYC. Sam Fuchs talked all about their trip over to the UK and also Full America Day, which took place against Southampton. And also Jack and Joe will be back on the pod feed next week as well. Jack Collins, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy. Always a pleasure.
Have a great weekend. Hopefully it's 3 points for the Whites and we can keep our hope of qualifying for Europe in the bag. You Whites!
You Whites!